Section 11 of Astounding Stories 19, July 1931. The Slave Ship from Space by A.R. Holmes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Mark Thornton, Miranda, New Zealand. The Slave Ship from Space. Twice that night, the two young men had seen the thing, and their hour for turning in had long since passed, as they lay half reclining on the ground by their campfire, waiting, hoping that it would return once more. Their interest in the strange visitant had completely banished all sensations of fatigue from a full day of vacation fishing in the cold Dianetics streams among which they were camping for that month. They had discussed the appearance until there was nothing more they could say, and now, as for the last hour, they watched in silence, only moving to knock the dottle from the pipes and to get fresh lights off the splinters they stuck into the slumbering fire. The velvet night was now at full reign, and the myriad stars in their familiar patterns lurned close, brilliant jewels for man to share, but never pluck. Jim Wilson had seen the thing first, a pinpoint of cherry red that moved upward in a perfect arc against the brilliant white constellations of the east. As it rose, it grew perceptibly larger, to dwindle again as it arced over the western horizon. Nearly an hour later, it had appeared again, but this time, when halfway up the skies, it had changed its direction until it was heading directly over the spot where the two thrilled campers were watching, and as it approached, they saw its color fade slowly until it had disappeared completely from sight among the inky patches between the stars overhead. For minutes the two were not able to locate it, until Jim, once again, had pointed to a faint red spot that grew in color and intensity as it drew away from the zenith. Once again it had disappeared over the rim of the western world, and from then on there was no thought of sleep in the minds of Jim Wilson and Clee Partridge. They were watching the skies, hoping it would return. "What was the thing?" Jim Wilson exclaimed suddenly with exasperation. "I've been racking my brain, Clee, but nothing I can think of makes sense. It couldn't have been a plane, and it couldn't have been a meteor. And if it were a firefly, well, then I'm one too." He paused and looked at the other. "Any new suggestions?" he asked. "Me? I still think it was a spaceship from Mars or Venus," Clee Partridge answered dryly. "Searching for a couple of good Earthmen to help them out of some jam. You noticed the way it disappeared for a moment when it was overhead? It was looking us over." "Then it'll be back," answered Jim, not to be outdone, "for it's not apt to find anyone better qualified. I myself would kind of like to take a joyride out through the Great Dipper." Clee smiled and looked down at the luminous dial of his wristwatch. The two resumed their vigil, and there was quietness between them. For some time they lost themselves in the sparkling glory of the firmament, hardly moving, except to pull closer the collars of their flannel shirts against the increasing coldness of the mountain air. And then, for the third time that night, the mysterious sky traveller sprang over the trees on the eastern horizon. Suddenly it appeared. Both men saw it at once, and this time it made a clear, beautiful arc straight for the zenith. As it raised, it grew in size, a beautiful, delicate cherry star spanning the whole welkin. The two men got to their knees and watched it, breathless with fascination. "Look!" cried Jim suddenly. As had happened on its second appearance, the thing began to slow up, and its color gradually faded as it drew directly overhead. By the time it should have reached the zenith, it could no longer be seen. It had dissolved against the inky spaces above. "It should come into view again in a moment," Clee said. "A little farther on, like the other time." They watched, thrilled by the mystery of the midnight phenomenon. Minutes passed, but still it did not appear. Clee grew restive, and as his eyes chanced on his wristwatch, he started violently and held out his arm for Jim to see. The radium-painted hands and dial were glowing with unusual brilliance. Looking quickly into the skies again, Clee sensed something wrong, something different. For a moment he could not figure out what, and then it came to him. One of the great stars, one that he had been watching in its climb up the sky through the night, had disappeared. He got excitedly to his feet, grabbed his companion's arm, and pointed out this strange thing. And as he pointed out, another star blinked out and did not reappear. "Something's happening up there," Jim said soberly. "I don't know what, but I, for one, don't feel quite comfortable." He kept peering at the place pointed out, at a spot of black, even darker than the inky sky. Or did he only imagine it was darker, he asked himself. Soon the spot enlarged, it became a distinct patch, then, growing still, obliterated one star after another around its borders. It made a pure circle, and before long the starlight glinting off its sides showed it to be a great tinted sphere. Swiftly it dropped down on the two men, and they watched it hypnotized, incapable of moving. It was only 100 yards overhead when some presence of mind returned to Clee. "Run, Jim!" he yelled, moving away. "It's coming straight down!" Wilson came out of his daze, and the two sprinted wildly for the path that led down the spur on which their camp was located. They had not made more than 50 yards when they heard a dull thud, and, turning, saw the great sphere resting on the ground with a slight rocking motion that quickly ceased. The gully cut into the trail ahead, and when they reached it, Clee grabbed his partner's arm and pulled him off to one side, where, panting with their sudden exertion, they wormed up to the brow and peeped over at the strange visitor. The sphere stood in the starlight on the very spot they had been occupying when they first saw it. Right in their campfire it lay, a great dark red crystal shape, perhaps 50 feet in diameter, whose surface sparkled with innumerable facets. It rested quietly on the ground, as if oblivious of the two rooted men breathlessly watching it from a short distance. No ports or variations of any kind were visible to mar its star-reflecting sides. "It must be some kind of dirigible," murmured Jim. "But why did it go and pick on us for its midnight call?" "It's a spaceship from Mars," answered Clee with a serious face. "They heard you, and are coming to take you for your ride. See?" he added quickly, pointing. A large door was opening in the side of the sphere, and the illumination within threw a bright beam of amber-coloured light in their direction. The metallic ramp slid out and angled down to the ground. Breathlessly, the two men waited to see who would emerge, but a long time went by without their catching the slightest sign of life within. The face of Clee's wristwatch was fluorescing brilliantly now, and moment by moment the weird glow was increasing. Jim stirred nervously. "I don't mind telling you I'm scared," he said. "Or they won't make you walk back," consoled Clee, but he was scared himself. Why didn't something happen? Why didn't someone come out of the ship? Jim thought he heard a noise and touched Clee on the shoulder, pointing to a place on the trail down which they had come a few minutes before. Clee looked, and as he did so the hair on the back of his neck stood up. For the bushes along the side of the path were moving as if they were being brushed aside by someone in passing, someone making a straight line to the spot where they lay concealed. And no one was there! "Can they be invisible?" breathed Jim, every pore in his body prickling. For a moment or two the two men could hardly breathe, so great was their unnamed fear. During that time no other movements could be noted. Then Clee suddenly pointed to a bush only 5 yards away. Half a dozen leaf-tipped branches were bending slowly in their direction, and then a sharp crack, as of a broken twig, came to them from the same spot. Panic, blind and unreasoning, swept them. "Run!" gasped Jim, and together, instinctively, they turned and scrambled down the side of the ridge to get away, anywhere, far from the approaching menace of they knew not what. Reckless of possible injury, they slid and stumbled down the brush-covered slope, and right behind them came sudden crashing sounds of pursuit. New fears lent wings to their flight. but the sounds behind continued inexorably at their heels, no matter how fast they ran or how lucky they were in making past obstacles. Their pursuer was as fast as they. They had no idea who or what it might be. From the brief glances they snatched over their shoulders, they could not see anything at all. The going was bad, and the two campers had not gone more than a quarter mile when they were breathing hard and felt that they could not make one more step without collapsing on the ground to give their labouring lungs a chance to catch up. Panting like dogs, they dragged themselves along through pine and birch trees, around large rocks and over briar-covered hills, only a few steps ahead of their pursuer. Then Partridge, a little in the lead as they made their way up a steep slope, heard Jim suddenly go sprawling, heard him gasp, "It's got me!" Turning, he saw his partner rolling and thrashing violently on the ground, and now and then lashing out at the empty air with his fists. Without a moment's hesitation, he jumped from his position above, jumped square and hard into the space which Jim's invisible assailant should be occupying. With a great thud, he crashed into some unseen body in the air and went down, the breath knocked out of him. As he got to his knees, an odour like that of cloves came to his nostrils, and something caught him around the neck and began constricting. Frantically, he tried to tear himself loose, but the harder he struggled, the more strangling became the grip on his neck, and at last, faint from the growing odour and the lack of air, his efforts dwindled into a spasmodic tightening and relaxing of muscles. Then, for a moment, the hold on his neck must have loosened, for he found himself able to breathe a little. Turning, he saw Jim at his side, apparently similarly held. "If only I could see it," Clee managed to get out. Jim's spasmodic, bitter answer came a moment later. "Being invisible, tremendous advantage," he gasped. In desperation, the two men again began to fight against the clutches that were holding them, and this time the grip about their necks unexpectedly loosened, to bring to their noses the odour of cloves, overpowering in strength. And that was all they knew before they lapsed into a black and bottomless void. Through the lifting haze of returning consciousness, Clee felt a command to get up. As he automatically complied, he saw that Jim was doing likewise. Once on his feet, he felt another impulse to go to the cherry crystal sphere, visible in the distance, but his legs were weak, and neither he nor Jim could walk very well, until out of the nothingness around them came something of invisible bulk to lend them support. Slowly, carefully, straight for the waiting globe the two men were conducted, and in his state of half-consciousness, Clee wondered at the impotence of his will to make his body offer resistance. They passed right by their tent, and up the ramp to the inside of the strange sphere. Clee's impressions were blurred and dull, but he noticed that they were in a small room brilliant with amber light, on one wall of which there was a circular area which contained a dozen or more instruments and levers and wheels. As his eyes rested on them, one of the levers moved, seemingly of itself, and the ramp came sliding into the ship, and the thick door slowly swung closed. Then they were conducted along a short, narrow passageway into which opened on the right a small dim room, and there the grip about their bodies loosened, and they slumped to the floor. The door whereby they had entered closed. A faint vibration became noticeable. They suddenly felt very heavy, and to the accompaniment of a low but rising hum, they saw one wall of their room begin to glow with a beautiful cherry colour. Although they had been too stupefied to try to speak, this spurred their tired bodies, and they dragged themselves over to it. They found the wall to be of some kind of hard crystal. It was the outer shell of the sphere, and now it gleamed redly transparent. Far out and down, the men saw a great convex surface on which lay narrow ribbons of silver, winding vein-like through dark areas that were in some places lit by little clusters of twinkling stars. As they watched, the distances on the surface shrank in on themselves. They could see the outline of a great circle. The sight stimulated the exhausted men. In a hushed and awestruck voice, Jim Wilson broke the silence. "We have been kidnapped," he said. "Being taken God knows where, out among the stars." He was getting the sky ride he had asked for. Clee smiled faintly and was going to remind him of this, but he was too tired to make the effort. He only looked at the tremendous scene below, at the Earth they knew so well, with its familiar streets, comfortable fireplaces, the faces of those they loved and others who were their friends. The Earth soon became a ball, a globe such as he had used at school, showing clearly the outline of the continents and oceans. And little by little it dwindled, until it was only a ghostly shape, far out in nothingness. A little later, had the two Earthlings not been deep in sleep, they might have seen enter a strange-looking man, clad in odd garments, a man whose great bulging head was quite bald, and whose wrinkled, leprous white face wore an expression of unutterable wisdom and majesty. In his hands he carried a strange piece of apparatus, which he held to Jim's wrist while it emitted a coarse vibratory hum that whined slowly up in pitch until it passed the range of hearing. He did the same thing to Clee, and then he left quietly. But the two Earthlings knew nothing of this. Limp on the floor, oblivious to everything, they slept. Some hours later found the kidnapped men well recovered and sitting on the floor of their cell talking over the situation. As usual, Wilson was thinking out loud. "What can they be? Or who?" he asked, frowning with his thought. "They can't be from Earth, for no one there could invent such a ship as this and keep it secret. And even if someone had, he could never have done the equally astounding thing of inventing a way to render living bodies invisible. I doubt if the thing that caught us was human, by what I was able to feel in my short struggle with it. It was something that might have been a hand, but the strength and weight of its body was enormous." "Well, we'll probably see soon," commented Clee with philosophic resignation, and pulling out of his pocket a package of tobacco and his corncob pipe. "Or rather, we may soon know. Our captors may keep themselves invisible, and of course it's barely possible that it's their natural state to be invisible, so that we may never hope to see them. What I'm chiefly afraid of is that they are from some other planet, and that's where we are being taken. Though heaven knows what any creature so infinitely far ahead of us Earthlings scientifically could want with a pair of young Earth lawyers." He offered the package to Jim. "Here, have a smoke. You'll feel better," he said. "While there's tobacco, there's hope." "At least they don't seem supposed to kill us right off," returned Jim, handing back the tobacco after lighting his own pipe. "Later, if there's to be any later for us, we may be able to find a way to get out of this room, though how we run the ship, to get back home, is another hard brick wall. Maybe the controls are invisible too," he suggested with a wry grin. "Ever take any pre-law courses on how to work the invisible controls of a spaceship?" Clee's reply was spoken low and was entirely irrelevant. "That's funny," he said. He was looking at the face of the watch on his left wrist. For the first time since they had been abducted, its abnormal brightness had left it. As Jim watched inquiringly, Clee moved his hand a little. Once more the dial leapt out through the dimness with unnatural brilliance. Jim saw that his friend was holding in this hand the package of tobacco. Clee repeated the demonstration. "The dial glows with unusual brightness always, except when I hold the package of tobacco in front of it at this spot," he said wonderingly, half to himself. "If I remember my science right, ultraviolet light would make the radium on the dial glow, and the lead in the tinfoil of the tobacco wrapping would screen it off. Let's see." He crossed to the other side of the room and held his watch and the package of tobacco in various positions, until he again found one line along which the watch dial gave off only its customary light. "Yes," he said, "exactly in the extended line made by my watch, and this package of tobacco is the source of the ray which makes the watch dial glow. It's probably the control room of this ship." "An extraordinary deduction, my dear Sherlock," commented Wilson dryly. "And valuable. I wish you'd now take a moment and deduce the reason for the mysterious appearance of the lumps on the back of our necks. I know I didn't have mine before I was taken for this sky ride." As he spoke, his hand sought the back of his neck, where there was a fat lump about the size of a quarter, a lump not painful for all its newness and size. Hard pushing with probing fingers had revealed something that seemed to be hard and flat, buried within. But close examinations failed to show any wound or scar, and the men had no notion what the lumps might be. Clee's was just like Jim's. But Clee did not respond to his friend's invitation. A heavy mood had come over him. He was standing by the outer wall, looking out. Jim went and stood beside him, his hand on his shoulder, and together they gazed through the cherry crystal wall of their prison ship, out on the loneliness of the immeasurable miles outside. For them, space was red instead of the deep black they knew they would see through colorless glass. Brilliant pinpoints of light, millions of them, in all sizes, made up the infinite space that was the background of their adventure. To which one, near which one were they going? Would they ever return to their Earth again? Would their friends ever know of the incredible adventure that had overtaken them? Or would they, after the few weeks of searching and inquiry that must follow their disappearance, at last conclude that some nameless mountain disaster had made them victims, and give them up for dead? No doubt. A month after succeeding month their memory would fade from the minds of those who loved them, while they would be... where? A peculiar dynamic thought came simultaneously into the minds of the two men. It was not a word, it seemed more like a feeling, but its unquestionable import was "come." Together they rose, and looked at each other wonderingly. Again came the feeling. They started for the door. "But that's foolish," Jim said aloud, as if objecting to his own thought. "The door's locked. We tried it." He looked at Partridge, who returned his gaze blankly, and then, in spite of what he had said, he reached out and turned the latch. The door swung open. Expressions of surprise died on the men's lips as again came the compelling urge to go to some unknown destination. "Suggestion," said Clee, as he passed through the doorway. "Someone's suggesting, telepathically willing, that we come to him, and God help me, I can't resist." His neck corded with veins and muscles, with his effort to restrain his body from obeying the mysterious command that was drawing it onward. Wilson, one arm outstretched in a repelling gesture, his legs stiff and tight, was also trying to resist. But the will that had sounded within them was stronger than theirs, and slowly, inevitably, they were drawn down the passage. Their carpeted way took them back to the entrance chamber, and then up a steeply sloping corridor that led upward to the left. As they passed along, they saw that the hand of a master had made on the walls, in panel effect, marvelously complicated decorations in many-colored mosaic. No man of Earth could ever have done such work, the two men realized, and this thought did not cheer them any. End of section 11.